We are living in a moment of, well, just simultaneous accelerating changes.
Everywhere you look.
Exactly. In technology, in society, and just in the sheer speed of daily life, if you feel like you're constantly in a state of high alert, bracing for the next big shift,
Whether it's a new AI tool coming for your job.
or an unexpected restructuring at work, you are definitely not alone. It feels chaotic, doesn't it? Like we're just victims of instability.
Hmm.
But what if we told you that this turbulence isn't just random external noise? What if you could step back, gain a real systematic understanding of why things feel so unstable?
And, more importantly, equip yourself with a precise strategy for adaptation that goes way beyond just reacting.
Right. Not just treading water.
That is the ultimate goal of this deep dive. The sources you've gathered here, they really represent a powerful toolkit.
They're quite diverse.
They are. And it's one that bridges these really abstract macro concepts of how societies evolve. Things like, cultural friction and systemic social shock with highly actionable micro strategies.
For personal growth, for communication, for resilience.
Exactly. We're moving from the huge global forces shaping the world right down to these specific psychological muscles you need to develop to actually thrive in it. It's about engineering a genuine adaptive edge.
And our source material today covers that full spectrum. We've got heavy academic papers detailing the mechanisms of sociocultural evolution.
Which can be pretty dense.
They can be, but they're sitting right next to these really practical guides on how to break harmful habits and strategic communication blueprints.
We'll also be looking at deep psychological studies on things like self-efficacy and managing crippling anxiety.
And then we'll pivot to expert forecasts that try to predict what the digital new normal is actually going to look like in 2025 and beyond.
So our mission really is to synthesize all of this, to move logically from understanding those powerful external forces concepts. We'll get into like dramatic social change and cultural lag to mastering the necessary internal resources. We'll be showing you how to cultivate self-efficacy, how to actively counter the cognitive biases that digital life just amplifies.
Oh, absolutely.
And how to leverage your social network in ways you probably haven't considered, especially those often overlooked weak social ties.
It sounds like a comprehensive map then, from the abstract challenges right down to the concrete actions you can take, maybe starting right now.
That's the plan.
All right, let's start with that widest possible perspective, the sort of high-altitude view of the world structure.
The 30,000-foot view.
Exactly. When change happens slowly, we integrate it pretty smoothly. We barely even notice.
Right. It just becomes part of the background.
But when the foundations of society feel like they're shattering, we feel that shockwave personally. We need a framework to understand this systemic turbulence. And that brings us to the first big concept: dramatic social change, or DSC.
DSC is such a crucial context for modern life, both professional and personal, because it really defines the conditions under which most rapid, large-scale crises happen.
Things like global economic shocks or, the rapid pivot we all went through during the pandemic.
Precisely. And what's crucial is that the sources define DSC very, very precisely. It's not just a big event.
It's not just a headline.
No, it requires 4 distinct characteristics to all be present for an event to actually qualify.
And these 4 characteristics, they really lay out exactly why these events are so destabilizing. The first is simply the rapid pace of change.
It sounds obvious, but the speed is critical.
It is. It's the speed at which an event impacts a collectivity, a large group of people. If an event moves too fast, institutions and individuals just don't have the luxury of gradual, iterative adjustment.
Right. It demands an immediate, overwhelming shift. You don't get to ease into it.
Not at all.
So if you consider that sudden shift to global remote work in early 2020, that was an event that affected billions of people within weeks, not years.
A perfect example.
That speed is the first characteristic. The second one addresses the systemic breakdown, a rupture in the social structure.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It signifies a break with the past so profound that core institutions like the healthcare system, the financial system, or the education system have to be completely reconstructed or, fundamentally transformed.
So the old way of doing things is just gone.
The existing operating system is suddenly unusable, obsolete overnight.
Following that structural break, you then have the third characteristic, which is a rupture in the normative structure.
And this one is all about behavior.
Right. It relates directly to collective behavior. It's a break from the past core behaviors of a group, requiring massive, significant modification just to achieve collective goals.
So you can't achieve success or safety using the old rules of engagement anymore.
Exactly. If Zoom suddenly replaces the office, your entire rulebook for communication, for management, for time tracking, it's just vanished.
And that leads to the fourth and final characteristic, the one that I think hits us most psychologically,
Which is?
the cultural identity threat. This is a serious challenge to the shared beliefs, values, attitudes, and the behavioral scripts we associate with our group.
So it's about who we think we are.
Precisely. When the system that defined your role, say being a stable 9-to-5 office worker or a small business owner who relies on foot traffic, when that's eliminated,
Your whole understanding of who you are and how you fit into the world is suddenly in question.
it's jeopardized. And this results in that generalized feeling of, a lack of clarity, confusion, and that profound instability we so often experience during major crises.
That is incredibly helpful, just laying out the actual mechanism of disruption. Let's make this more concrete with the historical example that was cited, the breakdown of the Soviet Union.
A perfect case study.
It really illustrates all four of those characteristics converging to create a massive social shock. The rapid pace was evident in the quick collapse of economic and political authority.
Absolutely. And the social and normative ruptures were immediate and devastating.
So let's talk about the example they gave of Zoya, this 75-year-old babushka.
Right. So the dissolution of the state triggered an immediate rupture in the social structure because she and millions of people like her lost their life savings literally overnight.
The entire institution of financial security, which had been guaranteed by the state, was just eliminated.
Gone.
Yeah.
And then you see the rupture in the normative structure.
That's the breakdown of the old rules and behaviors.
Yes. The decline of that formal state support and the breakdown of traditional collective behavior. Zoya could no longer rely on social services. She couldn't even rely on her family members, who were now struggling to hold down multiple precarious jobs just to survive.
The established societal contract, the rulebook for support, it just vanished.
Which then culminates in that intense cultural identity threat.
Right.
For people who had lived their entire lives within the defined parameters of the Soviet system, the sudden absence of those core systems meant their entire framework of beliefs and values was fundamentally questioned.
They were forced to operate in a world where their skills, their history, and their identity were instantly obsolete.
Exactly. So understanding DSC gives us that framework for recognizing why certain modern events feel less like challenges and more like foundational earthquakes.
Okay, so if DSC is that initial massive shock wave, then cultural lag is the resulting structural friction that we all have to deal with every single day.
It's the aftershock.
It is. This concept, which was coined by sociologist William F. Ogburn, doesn't just describe a problem. It describes a fundamental mismatch in how society evolves. And it's the source of so much of our modern policy confusion.
It really is. Cultural lag is the gap that occurs because our material culture, so the physical, tangible things like technology, infrastructure, innovation, it always sprints ahead faster than our non-material culture.
And the non-material culture is?
That's everything you can't touch. Our laws, our beliefs, our values, our ethical guidelines, our institutional frameworks. These things always lag behind. They move at a snail's pace in comparison.
And we see constant, real-time examples of this generating massive conflict and confusion. I mean, you can look at generative AI today.
The perfect example.
It has just burst onto the scene with technologies like deepfakes and mass automated content generation.
So the material culture, the technology itself, is fully developed and deployed. It's out there.
But the non-material culture, our laws on intellectual property, our societal norms about authenticity, or even our basic education system's ability to teach digital literacy against these sophisticated deepfakes,
It's nowhere near call up.
not even close.
Yeah.
And that delay creates these profound issues. A massive loss of trust, the inability to regulate harmful content, confusion over ownership.
Right. Or consider another example they use, genetic engineering and CRISPR technology.
Okay.
We have a technical ability right now to fundamentally alter life itself. That's the material culture.
But we absolutely do not have fully developed, globally agreed upon ethical guidelines or robust regulatory frameworks to ensure that this technology is used safely, equitably, and without, unintended future consequences.
That gap, that lag, is precisely why we have so much conflict and so many social problems. It just persists until our cultural norms, our institutions, and our laws finally catch up with the technology they are meant to govern.
And the sources are really emphatic about this. This lag isn't just a benign side effect. It is a primary structural impediment to successful, seamless adaptation.
It is. If we want to move past this perpetual state of confusing catch-up, we need intentional policy intervention and proactivity.
Okay, so if the solution is intentional policy, what does that actually look like? Because speeding up laws and ethics, that sounds like trying to accelerate a glacier.
It absolutely does, but that is the imperative. Mitigating cultural lag requires that proactive stance at the macro level.
From governments, from institutions.
Exactly. Governments, ethical bodies, educational institutions, they all must recognize that the material culture will accelerate. That's a given.
It's not slowing down.
Not a chance. Therefore, they have to prioritize and accelerate the adjustment of that non-material culture, our laws, our ethics, our educational curricula, to try and run alongside the technology rather than constantly chasing it from behind.
Which means what? More meetings?
It means fostering planned, collaborative change among all the relevant stakeholders, moving beyond just informal communication and into structured, intentional regulatory foresight, thinking about the second and third order effects before they happen.
Okay. Since change is guaranteed and it's often accelerated, let's talk strategy, both on an organizational and a personal level. We really have to distinguish between simply adapting to a change and proactively shaping our engagement with it.
This distinction is absolutely vital. Adaptation is necessary, of course, but it is fundamentally reactive.
It's playing defense.
It is. It means adjusting after a change or a crisis has already occurred. It's what everyone does. You're putting out the fire that's right in front of you. And it's often favored because solving an immediate burning issue provides an immediate, observable reward. You feel productive.
But in an environment that's defined by acceleration and instability, that reactive stance is just. It's insufficient for sustained survival, let alone for gaining a competitive advantage. And this is where proaction becomes the strategic imperative.
Proaction is predictive. It's playing offense. It means taking present, intentional action to prepare for anticipated future changes.
It's thinking several steps ahead. It's scanning the horizon constantly.
For organizations, this proactive culture is the very foundation of long-term success. Proactive organizations continuously scan the business environment, not just their immediate competitors.
Yeah, it's broader than that.
Much broader. They're looking at technological, social, and political trends for changes that haven't even fully materialized yet. This foresight, this willingness to act on a prediction, contributes massively to success and performance improvement.
Can you give us a sort of classic example of that comparative advantage?
Well, think about the difference between Netflix and Blockbuster. It's a classic example from business history for a reason. Blockbuster was reactive. They only adapted after Netflix had already introduced physical rental by mail and then pivoted aggressively into streaming.
They were always one step behind.
Always. Netflix, however, was proactive. They were constantly looking ahead. They invested heavily in streaming infrastructure before the market was even ready for it, anticipating the expansion of broadband.
So they were building for a future that hadn't arrived yet.
Exactly. And this foresight enabled them to capture a new market entirely, developing a corporate flexibility, a productivity, and an efficiency that a purely reactive competitor could never, ever match.
That makes perfect sense, and yet most companies and most individuals, I would say, default to reaction. I want to push back on this a bit, because if proaction is so clearly superior, why isn't it the default? What's the biggest roadblock?
That's an excellent challenge, and the source material highlights that the challenge is deeply systemic and psychological.
Okay.
The biggest roadblock is really twofold. Systemically, it's overcoming what's called systemic inertia,
The resistance to change.
the natural human and bureaucratic resistance to shifting resources or changing direction in any large system. We just prefer the known path.
And what about the psychological barrier? Because that affects individuals just as much as organizations.
Psychologically, it's navigating the challenge of delayed benefits. Proactive measures demand a significant upfront investment. Social capital, financial resources, emotional energy.
A lot of effort now.
A lot of effort now, with returns that may not materialize for months or even years.
So it's hard to stay motivated.
It's very hard. For example, learning a new complex software or restructuring your entire team's workflow requires intense effort now, but the competitive payoff is way off in the distant future. Reactive measures, on the other hand, offer immediate psychological rewards because you're solving the urgent problem that's right in front of you.
So the real difficulty is building the foresight, the discipline, and the patience to invest now in a future that hasn't definitively arrived yet.
That's the game.
So we've established the macro forces, DSC, and cultural lag that make the external world so turbulent.
Right. The big picture.
Now let's pivot inward and talk about the personal interface with that turbulence, which inevitably forces us out of our comfort zone. We all know the phrase, but let's look at the sort of scientific and practical definition.
The comfort zone is precisely defined as a mental, emotional, and behavioral space where all your activities feel familiar, safe, and easily manageable.
Low risk?
Minimal risk. You minimize the risk of stress, of failure, of negative feedback. It's where your current skills perfectly match your current environment without any friction.
And it feels good to be there.
It does. But there's a powerful, hardwired biological imperative driving us to stay put.
The sources remind us that the human brain is intrinsically wired to avoid fear and uncertainty.
It's a survival mechanism.
Absolutely. Historically, this wiring was essential for survival. Uncertainty might have meant a hidden predator in the bushes. But today, that same wiring, which often manifests as just low-level anxiety or resistance to change, becomes a primary barrier. It actively prevents our personal and professional growth.
Exactly. We are programmed to conserve energy and avoid novelty, even if that novelty promises a reward down the line.
So what's the goal?
The goal, therefore, isn't to live in a state of constant panic, but to consciously move beyond the comfort zone to what they call the growth zone.
That requires tolerating a manageable level of initial fear.
A manageable level. You have to grapple with mild anxiety, not crippling anxiety. That transition through manageable discomfort is what allows you to emerge stronger, having acquired new skills and a deeper sense of self-assurance.
And what's truly fascinating to me is that this transition isn't just metaphorical, it is demonstrably neurobiological.
It is.
The process of initially uncomfortable behaviors, say giving a major presentation to strangers for the first time, becoming more permanent until they feel normal, is literally the neurobiological definition of comfort zone expansion.
You are physically building new neural pathways. You're rewiring your brain.
That's amazing.
It is. And adapting to large systemic societal shifts, like the sudden requirement to master a new AI tool for your job, or adapting to the new social norms of a hybrid office, that requires you to learn new social and technical behaviors.
So it's a workout for your brain.
It demands a systematic, persistent effort on your individual neuroplastic capacity. You are physically and mentally reshaping your brain to accommodate a new normal. And it requires sustained energy and intentional effort, and that's often what people burn out on.
It's exhausting. So where do we start? How do we initiate this often painful process of comfort zone expansion?
The foundational first step is a shift in perspective. It's about questioning and challenging your existing paradigms.
Okay, define a paradigm in this context.
A paradigm is not just a belief. It's a powerful, deeply entrenched belief that shapes your entire approach to life. It filters all the incoming information you receive.
The sources use the example of Jane.
Right. Jane was caught in the paradigm that non-stop, visible work, being the first one in the office, the last one out, was the only path to professional success and validation.
That's a very common belief.
Very. And that paradigm kept her perpetually stressed and on the verge of burnout.
So what did she do?
By understanding and questioning that core, powerful belief, by asking, is there another way success is measured? Is this really the only way? Jane could start to see the value in rest, in setting boundaries, in focused deep work instead of just long hours.
And that allowed her to adopt a more balanced and ultimately a more successful approach.
Exactly. The ability to question those deeply held, often unconscious beliefs that shape our approach to life is the critical prerequisite for any growth. It opens the door to possibilities you previously just filtered out.
That makes a lot of sense. So once we intentionally push beyond our comfort zone, we need to ensure that that growth is sustainable.
Right. It can't be a one-off thing.
And the sources stress that adaptation is not just a passive reaction. It's an active demonstration of agency.
Agency is the power to make choices and influence outcomes, even within constraints. You're not just a leaf in the wind.
And sustained growth, it seems, relies on specific, trainable psychological resources.
It does. And the most critical of these is self-efficacy.
Which is defined as
An individual's belief in their capacity to execute the behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments.
So in simpler terms,
It's the difference between saying, I hope I succeed, and I believe I have the skills and the ability to succeed. It's that powerful internal expectation of success.
And according to Albert Bandura, who pioneered this concept, the single most powerful driver of self-efficacy isn't praise or motivation.
No, it's mastery experiences.
It's the cycle of achievement, even the small ones.
Absolutely. Each instance where you venture beyond the familiar and achieve a desired outcome, it reinforces that foundational self-belief. It's like building a muscle.
And the sources note that even managing failure correctly increases resilience.
Yes, this is so important. If you approach a challenge and you succeed, great. But if you fail correctly,
What does it mean to fail correctly?
it means you learn from the process, you adjust your strategy, and you bounce back. Those experiences, the recovery itself, reinforce the belief that you can handle challenges and recover. The recovery is the key mastery experience, not necessarily the initial success.
Now let's flip this around. Let's talk about the negative side. What are the concrete high-cost consequences when self-efficacy is low?
Low self-efficacy is a massive psychological drain. It leads to profound pessimism. It causes individuals to abandon their goals much more quickly when they're faced with even the slightest hurdle.
They just give up.
They give up. And it forces them to rely on less adaptive coping strategies when they're stressed.
And we need to know what those are. What are those less adaptive strategies we should be watching out for? That's where the rubber meets the road.
Well, they fall into categories like avoidance procrastinating, ignoring problems, hoping they'll just disappear.
Which they never do.
They never do. Or denial, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of a situation. Or, in more severe cases, a reliance on substance used to numb the anxiety.
So these strategies don't solve the problem at all.
No, they only temporarily suppress the uncomfortable emotion, which actually makes future adaptation even harder.
And the sources also cite low self-efficacy as a powerful indicator of depression and learned helplessness, particularly in populations facing chronic stress.
That's right. They mentioned a study of multiple sclerosis patients, for example. Your mental state is powerfully tied to your belief in your own capacity to cope.
Okay, so for the listener who wants a practical tool right now, a self-efficacy boost, what is the simplest, most immediate action they can take?
The simplest, most direct practical tool is the intentional use of positive self-talk. You have to learn to recognize when that voice of self-doubt surfaces.
That inner critic.
That inner critic. And you intentionally replace that internalized script with confidence-boosting encouragement. So instead of, I can't do this, you literally say to yourself, I have the capacity to figure this out.
It sounds so simple.
It sounds simple, but it builds an immediate internal support system and helps shift your focus from the perceived threat to the achievable task. It's a small hinge that swings a big door. #C. Managing uncertainty and fear.
Uncertainty is not going away. If anything, it's the defining characteristic of this era of accelerated change.
It's the new normal.
It is. So the essential question is, how do we cope when the future feels completely unknowable and catastrophic thinking starts to take over?
And we have some excellent, actionable resilience strategies on this, derived from research from places like Dartmouth and Cigna.
These strategies, they seem to be entirely focused on pulling your mind out of the future where all those what-if scenarios live.
Right.
And anchoring it firmly in the present moment, which is the only place you actually have any control.
Exactly. The first strategy is to bring your thoughts to the present.
Okay. When uncertainty is high, our default setting is to dwell on those what-if thoughts, and they inevitably highlight the absolute worst-case scenarios, which just amplifies worry and fear.
It's a downward spiral.
So the technique to combat this is mindfulness, but not in some vague sense. It's a physical reset.
It is. You literally stop what you're doing, and you intentionally take slow, deep, controlled breaths. And you focus your attention on the physical sensations of breathing.
Just the feeling of the air.
Yes. Then you use your 5 senses to notice the immediate world around you. The texture of your chair, the sound of the air conditioning, the taste in your mouth. This forces your prefrontal cortex to reset that catastrophic thinking loop.
It breaks the cycle.
And it allows you a moment of genuine grace and mental clarity.
The second strategy addresses that feeling of paralysis that so often accompanies overwhelm. Practice small, intentional actions.
I love this one. When the macro world feels completely chaotic, you regain agency by mastering the micro.
So you combat that paralyzing feeling of powerlessness by focusing on small, controllable actions in the moment.
This could be something as mundane as consciously and thoroughly doing the dishes.
Right. Or organizing a single desk drawer.
Or taking a planned walk outdoors, or consciously turning off a news feed. These are small wins, and they build a critical momentum against stress.
They remind you, I can control this immediate environment.
Exactly, and that leads directly into the third strategy, which is absolutely essential in our media-saturated world. Monitor your media use.
We are just not built to process relentless tragedy and alarm 24/7.
We're not. The repetition of alarming details, especially via imagery and video, is emotionally exhausting, and it can even be re-traumatizing for people.
So the recommendation is to become hyper-aware of your emotional reaction to media consumption and to limit viewing and scrolling as needed.
And be specific about it. Actively set a timer for your consumption, say 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, and then stick to it.
Furthermore, in a world that is just full of weaponized disinformation, controlling your information intake is a core resilience measure.
It's a matter of mental hygiene.
It is. You have to actively vet your sources and ensure you are using multiple diverse viewpoints to gather information, rather than just relying on a single repetitive feed that confirms your biases.
It's an act of self-care and critical thinking all rolled into one.
Mm.
Okay, so moving from the resilience of the self to the challenge of the social self. Our existing psychological wiring, our imperfect models of the world, they interact with digital tools in ways that just massively amplify our worst instincts.
So our intrinsic tendency toward cognitive biases gets magnified exponentially by this constant information overload.
Absolutely. These biases are essentially mental shortcuts that help us process a complex world quickly, but they often lead to serious errors in judgment.
Which results in what we can call tip of the iceberg thinking. We only see the surface level explanation.
A prime example of this is the availability heuristic.
Okay, what is that?
This is the inclination to judge the likelihood or the frequency of an event based on how readily available that information is in our memory. If it's constantly reported in the news, we start to think it's a constant threat, even if the actual statistical probability is incredibly low.
And this heuristic leads directly to simplistic, surface-level blame for very complex problems.
It does. When you look at the complex, deeply systemic housing crisis, for example,
Hmm.
the availability heuristic inclines people to focus on the readily available, emotionally resonant scapegoats.
So you end up blaming external groups, migrants coming in and taking houses, or blaming greedy individual landlords.
Right. And the reason that framing is so effective is because it allows you to ignore the deeper, less emotionally satisfying systemic issues.
Hmm.
Restrictive zoning laws, a lack of investment in housing stock, the global financialization of real estate.
It's easier to blame a person than a system.
Much easier. That quick surface-level analysis allows the media and politicians to perpetuate the same cycles of blame without ever addressing the core structural problems.
Another related bias the sources flag is the status quo bias.
Which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's simply the preference for the default option or the existing state of affairs. We will choose things that are familiar, even if a new approach promises vastly better results.
Just because the risk of changing feels greater than the known discomfort of staying put.
Exactly.
So, since these biases are hardwired into our brains, we can't just switch them off. How do we introduce that intentional second layer of thinking that's required to overcome them?
It requires deliberation. The first step is reflection and deliberation. You have to learn to notice your initial, intuitive, emotional reaction to a piece of information.
Just pause for a second.
Just pause. Then you step back and you apply reasoned analysis. And the source material suggests introducing a structured method for this, using Socratic questioning.
This needs to become a mental habit, right? Not a checklist.
A habit, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you feel a strong reaction, you must intentionally ask yourself clarifying questions to refine your thinking. What specific assumptions am I making here about cause and effect?
What alternative perspectives or structural explanations might exist?
And more importantly, what evidence supports or even contradicts my initial visceral reaction? This deliberate friction is what breaks the bias loop.
And finally, you have to actively seek diverse perspectives. You cannot stay in your bubble.
You can't. You must intentionally discuss issues with others and listen to credible experts with differing opinions, especially those who will challenge your viewpoint. This active exposure forces you to reconsider your assumptions and explore alternative interpretations of the facts. #IFAB, the echo chamber effect and polarization.
So when we fail to implement that Socratic questioning or intentionally seek out diverse views, we fall directly into the echo chamber effect.
And these are environments which are amplified heavily by social media algorithms, where individuals are predominantly exposed only to reinforcing opinions.
And opposing views are systematically filtered out, or worse, ridiculed.
Right. Social media algorithms are designed to maximize engagement, and they do this by prioritizing what you already like and agree with.
And this plays a massive role in perpetuating these echo chambers, which essentially segregate users into rigid clusters with homogenous views, whether they're political, lifestyle, or professional.
And the consequences are severe.
Mm.
They reach into every corner of public discourse and even personal health. For example, echo chambers obviously strengthen confirmation bias.
But they also multiply the spread of misinformation and weaponized fake news.
And they contribute heavily to a hardening of societal polarization, making reasoned deliberation almost impossible.
And on a deeply personal level, the sources highlight some severe, even dangerous impacts on mental health. For instance, exposure to harmful content within these isolated chambers can be devastating.
This is where we need to clarify a term like thinspo.
Right.
This stands for thinspiration. It's content that idealizes extreme, often unhealthy thinness, and actively promotes unhealthy eating habits.
And when people, particularly those with existing body image insecurities, are algorithmically funneled into these chambers.
The continuous exposure to this unattainable ideal can severely erode their self-esteem, and it can lead to or exacerbate severe eating disorders and other mental health issues.
So breaking free requires more than just changing what you read. It requires breaking those reinforcing psychological loops. What are the intentional strategies we can adopt?
Well, the strategies include actively seeking out and engaging with diverse perspectives, consuming news from multiple, varied, and carefully vetted sources, and critically examining the sources of your emotional reactions to content.
And furthermore, the sources suggest that seeking professional help through therapy can be invaluable here.
It can.
So how does professional help tie into breaking out of an echo chamber?
Therapy provides a safe, neutral, non-judgmental environment. It helps you critically analyze the information you're consuming, understand the root causes of your perspectives and your biases, and, crucially, foster empathy towards differing viewpoints.
So it builds the cognitive and emotional flexibility that you need to navigate these complex, polarized social landscapes.
Which is exactly what an echo chamber seeks to destroy.
Hmm.
##C. The erosion of social cohesion.
Okay, so beyond the digital environment distorting our perspective, the shift toward a more isolated digital existence risks replacing vital face-to-face interactions with isolation.
And that actively erodes our social cohesion and our mental health.
This really highlights the critical importance of different types of relationships. We all value our strong connections, our close family and friends,
Of course.
but we need to appreciate the strategic value of weak ties.
Right. These are the connections to people you know, but not that well. An acquaintance from a former job, a stranger you chat with at a coffee shop, a colleague in another department.
And weak ties are not just important, they're often the source of novel information, new job opportunities, and new perspectives.
Because they bridge different social bubbles. They are the conduits for information that doesn't circulate within your immediate familiar circle.
And I loved this creative, actionable suggestion from the sources to intentionally enlarge your network of weak connections.
Second-degree dinner.
Yes. Instead of asking guests to bring a bottle of wine, you ask them to bring a new person, a stranger to you. To intentionally and systematically expand your circle of weak connections and introduce new perspectives into your life.
It's a great idea. And while expanding connections is vital, we also need to encourage pro-social behavior, which is often inhibited by a phenomenon called the bystander effect.
This is the idea that when a person is in distress or needs help, the likelihood of any single person stopping to help actually decreases as the number of other people present increases.
Right. The assumption is always someone else must have already called for help, or someone else has already taken responsibility.
So if you want to be the person who intervenes, the research on pro-social behavior suggests there's a sequence of 5 key things that must happen.
It's a cascade of decisions. First, you have to actually notice the event.
Second, you must interpret it as an emergency, not just a normal situation.
Third, and this is crucial, you must feel personal responsibility act.
Fourth, you have to believe you have the skills to help. And finally, you must make a conscious choice to assist.
It's a whole chain of thought that has to happen in seconds. And critically, empathy is the key to short-circuiting that collective inertia.
How so?
Individuals with high empathy are far more likely to take that personal responsibility and offer assistance. This just reinforces why cultivating social health caring about the person next to you, even if they're a weak tie, is directly linked to community health and resilience.
And the benefits of socializing are not just ethical or civic, they are demonstrably biological.
They are. Socializing provides surprising health benefits. It stimulates brain activity, it strengthens neural pathways, and it actively slows cognitive decline.
So research clearly shows that older adults who regularly socialize have a measurable better working memory, faster processing speed, and improved verbal fluency compared to those who are isolated.
Moreover, strong social connections encourage healthier choices through positive influence. If your social circle prioritizes exercise, you're much more likely to exercise.
And the studies cited show that when one partner improves their health behaviors, like exercising more or drinking less, the other spouse or partner is highly likely to follow suit.
Exactly. Weak ties and strong ties, they both create this crucial, healthy feedback loop for our minds and our bodies.
As we turn our attention now toward professional life and the future of work, one of the most fundamental shifts is how the creator economy is altering communication and the very location of trust.
hmm
And this is forcing every company, large or small, to start behaving like a creator.
This is a massive and I think often overlooked structural change. Trust traditionally resided in polished institutions, in official press releases, in corporate brands,
The faceless logo.
a faceless logo.
Right.
Now, the data confirms that trust has migrated to individuals. 70% of Gen Z say they trust creators more than traditional celebrities or brands.
70%. That is a foundational recalibration of credibility, and companies ignore that at their peril.
They do. The implication is that the rigid line between a creator and a company is just dissolving. Successful communication is shifting towards fast, personal, and fundamentally human interaction.
We see high-growth, creator-savvy organizations embracing extreme founder visibility.
Think about the tone of the communications from leaders like Shopify CEO Toby Lutke. He often shares strategic thoughts or personal reflections with a tone that's much closer to an authentic journal entry than a highly curated press release.
Right. Or Canva's Melanie Perkins, who's constantly highlighting user creativity and her own sort of open source leadership journey.
This transparent personal storytelling is what builds the audience trust, what the sources are calling the new brand mode.
And the success of brands created by individuals like Mr. Beast's snack line Feastables makes this crystal clear.
Oh, absolutely. The product's immediate success rides on the years of transparent, vulnerable, and personal storytelling that was built between the creator and the audience.
So the implication for modern leadership is that it needs to be visible, vocal, and often vulnerable. Attention is now given to the most present and authentic voice, not the most polished or inaccessible corporate identity.
But I want to introduce a point of necessary skepticism here because the listener needs to think critically about this shift.
Okay.
If 70% of trust now resides in a single, fallible individual creator, doesn't that make the entire creator economy and the brands built on it fundamentally unstable? What happens when that single individual stumbles or decides to pivot entirely?
That is the core vulnerability. The risk is magnified, but the reward is exponential, which is why companies are willing to take that risk.
And they are mitigating this instability by deepening the engagement from purely digital to real-world experience. We're seeing a huge experiential marketing trend which leverages that personal trust.
So trust is built digitally, but monetized in person.
That's right. 41% of U.S. social media users attended at least one in-person influencer event in the past year. Live events, like massive podcast tours, are generating significant returns. One network reported that 88% of its live events sold out, with some shows selling out in minutes.
And that shows the high ROI through merchandise and ticket sales that's generated by this in-person connection.
The tools build the relationship, but the physical experience is what solidifies the loyalty. #BB. Adapting communication styles strategically.
So whether you're a brand or an individual, navigating these high-stakes, fast-moving landscapes requires intentional, strategic communication. It is no longer enough to just deliver information.
The first rule of strategic communication, whether you're dealing with a crisis or simple disagreement, is to clearly define your objectives, your audience, and the channel required.
So the objective, for example, crisis management versus announcing a new product feature, has to rigorously define the tone, the style, and the optimal channel of communication.
Right. You wouldn't set a crisis memo as a TikTok video.
Hopefully not. And this strategic adaptation is particularly vital in increasingly polarized social and political contexts. When you're navigating difficult political disagreements, the sources offer several actionable strategies to reduce immediate conflict.
The first one is to approach the conversation as an advocate for understanding, not as an opponent.
What does that mean in practice?
It means adapting your conversational style, carefully using your language, and actively avoiding specific, emotionally charged words that might immediately put the other person on the defensive. You have to meet them where they are.
Second, pick your battles wisely. The practical advice here is to avoid the huge, national, tribal, hot-button political issues that people have their rigid identities wrapped around.
Instead, focus on local politics or specific policy outcomes. Talking about local infrastructure improvements is far less polarized than talking about party alignment.
It makes the conversation concrete and actionable.
It does. And finally, a strategy that's frequently adopted by less polarized, more socially connected people is this. Focus on the people, not the politics.
So you emphasize shared humanity, common community goals, or joint interests, like ensuring local parks are safe.
Exactly. By doing that, you can often bypass the immediate political differences that lead to conflict, and you can find common grounds beneath that ideological surface. ##C. Insights into the digital new normal, 2025 plus.
The pandemic acted as a massive accelerator for digitization, and the expert canvassings we looked at project significant transformative societal change into 2025 and beyond. And when these experts look at this new normal, they generally split into two broad camps. Those who foresee a mostly worse future,
The pessimists.
and those who foresee a mostly better future for most people.
The optimists.
Right. Let's start with the key worries that require proactive planning, because these are big structural problems. The most immediate is profound economic inequality.
Experts worry that the highly connected and tech-savvy professional class will pull even further ahead, while technological change automation and advanced AI eliminates swaths of middle-skill jobs.
Pushing more people into precarious, low-wage gig economy existence, it widens the gap.
It widens the gap. Another pervasive worry is the massive expansion of surveillance and the erosion of privacy.
Experts predict that decentralized, persistent biometric surveillance, from facial recognition to gait analysis, may soon transition from an optional security measure to essential societal infrastructure.
Normalizing social control across the board.
Yes. And critically, workplace surveillance is expanding rapidly. This includes video monitoring, keystroke logging, even wearables.
And it's entering the home environment now, as employers seek to track productivity in the hybrid world.
And the sources emphasize that this normalizes social control, and it disproportionately affects the less powerful, who often have less recourse to push back on this kind of intrusive monitoring.
The third major worry is the pervasive nature of misinformation. Experts cite the seemingly unstoppable manipulation of public perception, emotion, and political action via weaponized disinformation.
Lies and hate speech deliberately used to propagate biases.
It's a severe threat to social stability and to rational, evidence-based deliberation. It makes it harder to even agree on a basic set of facts.
Now, despite those dire warnings, the hopes for the digital new normal are equally transformative, driven by the very same technological advancements.
One key hope is better life-work integration. Remote work will likely settle into a minimum office model, perhaps 20 to 40% in the office, depending on the industry.
Which reduces commutes, reduces pollution, and could potentially lead to a shorter work week overall, maybe 20 hours or less for certain creative industries.
Then there are the advanced technologies themselves. AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, machine learning. They're all predicted to yield dramatically better virtual collaboration tools that simulate face-to-face contact more realistically.
Which could overcome some of the isolation we discussed earlier.
It could. And ubiquitous augmented reality may become practical, enhancing how we interact with information overlays in the physical world.
And finally, a major hope rests on the education revolution.
Experts foresee a robust marketplace of educational choices emerging, allowing for personalized schooling menus where students can pick and choose high-quality courses from all over the globe.
And this has significant potential for training and upskilling workers remotely.
It does. Standardized testing may even disappear entirely, replaced by assessment using sophisticated, agent-based dialogue systems.
Okay, let's unpack that jargon quickly. What is an agent-based dialogue system in this context?
Think of it as a highly sophisticated, adaptive AI tutor or examiner.
So instead of bubbling in a standardized test.
The AI engages the student in a deep, real-time conversation about a complex topic. It doesn't just check for facts. It assesses critical thinking, reasoning, and conceptual depth based on how the student articulates and defends their ideas.
Offering a far more personalized and accurate assessment of true competency.
Exactly. A whole different ballgame.
We've covered a lot of ground: global forces, psychological resilience, digital challenges. Let's return one last time to the internal dimension with the POZE paradigm.
This is a powerful framework that was developed through humanitarian research, and it's aimed at achieving inner peace and sustainable collective change in a world that feels complex and chaotic.
And POZE is an acronym, but it also translates from Haitian Creole as inner peace.
It does. And this framework is built on the understanding that individual behavior and ultimately decision-making are shaped by four fundamental integrated dimensions of our being.
Soul, heart, mind, and body.
Correct. And these dimensions express themselves as aspirations, which is the soul, emotions, the heart, thoughts, the mind, and physical sensations, the body.
So POZE emphasizes that our decisions are only partially rational. They don't just appeal to the mind.
No, our emotions, processed largely in the amygdala, significantly influence our choices. The neural and psychological research confirms that emotions and cognitive processes are tightly integrated.
Which means feelings are systematic and can actually be utilized in change dynamics.
They can. And this holistic understanding of integrated emotional and cognitive behavior leads to the POZE framework scale of influence, the process of moving individuals, teams, or communities toward change, beginning with the lowest intensity stage.
The first stage is informing.
This appeals solely to the mind. This involves providing facts, figures, technical data. But we know information alone rarely guarantees action or lasting change.
So the second stage is inducing emotions, which appeals to the heart.
Right. This means pulling people in through powerful stories, relatable narratives, and compelling images to achieve an attitude shift.
Moving from merely knowing about an issue to genuinely caring about its implications for themselves and for others.
Exactly. Next is intriguing, and this is where the real paradigm shift happens. It means pushing the person out of their acquired mental comfort space by providing a radically different perspective that challenges their current belief system and assumptions.
It forces that Socratic questioning we were talking about earlier.
It does. The fourth stage is igniting. This involves offering the spectator the opportunity to experience what change feels and looks like if someone else acts. It makes the change tangible and relatable.
This could be a powerful demonstration or a visible commitment from a leader.
And the resulting action, the fifth and final stage, is the bodily expression of change, the physical commitment, which then inspires other observers and restarts the entire scale.
It demonstrates how even micro-actions can generate macro change by moving through the mind, the heart, and finally the body. #tag outro. We've taken an exhaustive journey today. We've moved from the systemic shock of dramatic social change and the persistent friction of cultural lag through the psychological necessity of expanding our comfort zones and boosting our self-efficacy.
And finally, into navigating the complexities of digital communication, the creator economy, and that split future of the new normal.
The core message that seems to thread through all of our sources is that sustained adaptation requires intentional agency, a proactive choice to steer your own path, not just a passive reaction to external forces.
And for you, the learner, the most important takeaway in this environment of rapid shifts is the mandate for continuous learning and communication development.
You can't stand still.
You can't. Regularly and intentionally updating your communication skills ensures you remain relevant, effective, and influential. This means proactively seeking out experienced mentors or coaches, collaborating frequently with colleagues from diverse backgrounds to absorb varied styles, and actively joining professional learning communities that force you to confront new ideas.
That brings us back to the personal reality of work in this accelerating world. As we look at the automation that's being driven by AI and machine learning, professional value shifts dramatically.
It really does.
It moves away from mere execution, the making of the thing, because that production lag is increasingly being eliminated by technology. The value now resides in the thinking of the thing.
The conceptualization, the taste, the strategic ideas, the intellectual work.
Which is why the continuous work cycle, that relentless production demanded by systemic inertia, is really just a path to burnout and irrelevance.
If you never have the time to sit and read, to research, and to truly think, to perform that high-level intellectual labor, you lose your competitive edge in an automated landscape.
The only thing AI can't automate is profound critical insight.
That's it.
So let's leave you with one final provocative thought to consider as you navigate this adaptive age. Given the acceleration of change and the rise of tools that eliminate the production lag, How will you intentionally reclaim time, not just for passive rest, but for the fundamental, difficult work of critical thinking and knowledge acquisition?
Because those are the very things technology is simultaneously seeking to reorganize and, if we're not careful, to distort.